Hello again, soccer fans. This is Nick Pateris, Mike Guglielmi for the Sons of a Pitch, an American soccer podcast. We are continuing our 2020 season previews, and tonight we are looking at the Vancouver Whitecaps. Today is February 12th, so if any action happens between now and posting, don't blame us, just blame the timeline of things. And we are very happy to be joined by a Vancouver Whitecaps expert. And I'm going to call him an expert. I'm going to hold him to that and make sure that he gives you all his expert advice. We are joined by Alexandre Gangue Ruzic. And I hope I got that right, Alexander.
Oh, yeah. No, you nailed it.
Perfect.
Good there.
Alexander is the editor-in-chief of Between the Sticks, a Vancouver Whitecaps website. He is on Twitter at Alex Gangue Ruzic, and also his website is at BTS Van City. So, Alexander, thank you for joining us to talk Whitecaps. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into Whitecaps, how you got into writing, and let us know let the fans and listeners know where they can find your work.
All right. Well, thanks, Nick and Mike, for having me on. It's a big pleasure. And basically, Between the Sticks, it's not actually that old. It was founded about a year and about 7 days, if I'm not mistaken, from today, actually. It was just
happy anniversary.
Yeah, thanks. It was a couple of friends and we decided, okay, we looked, you go on Google, you Google Vancouver Whitecaps, there's the papers, but website-wise, there's great content out there, but there's just not maybe a void. I'm like, okay, let's see what we can do. We'll see how it goes, and it's just kind of skyrocketed since. We've had the pleasure going to all sorts of games, cover all sorts of events, meet all sorts of people. So it's been a heck of a ride. So our website, yeah, as you mentioned, is btsvancity.com, and there usually I'm trying to post 4 to 5 times a week. Obviously, Whitecaps is our main coverage point, but we do Canadian Premier League. We do all of the Canadian national teams, male, female, youth sometimes when they play, and we're just trying to cover as much as we can.
So you guys have had a lot to write about that in this last year as far as covering the Canadian national teams and the growth of the Premier League. Like, how do you guys even plan to cover all this new content?
Well, it's just kind of like we started with the Whitecaps, and then we're just like, well, there's a new league starting. Let's go. There's no media. It's kind of like a chance to get out there and kind of put your name out there and get coverage because people are looking for coverage, and the CPL especially. So it's just kind of like that, and especially the national team, I find, say, the U.S., they get a lot of great coverage, especially through MLSsoccer.com, the Athletic, etc. You go through, they have experts, but Canada, you have maybe your handful of guys, but there's not really that much. So I find covering Canada especially has been great because that was a huge moment, and people around the country love that. So it's been good to kind of spread our net and cover a lot of soccer, because I think just the Whitecaps, especially last year, it might have driven us a bit crazy. So it's good just to try something new, right?
Absolutely. And just so you know, full disclosure here, Mike is a big Toronto FC super fan. So hopefully that doesn't sour any of the conversation a little bit. But again, in the interest of full disclosure, I just want to let you know you're talking to a Reds fan here too.
That's fine. That doesn't bother me at all. I used to watch them a lot before the Whitecaps even had an MLS team, and I still do.
Excellent. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. Mike, why don't you kind of walk us through a little bit of the players in and out? We can start diving into some of the actual Vancouver roster information. And as our fans and listeners know, we'll break down all the transactions that have occurred this offseason, look at the DPs, the young stars that are upcoming, who is going to be the best player on the team, and then some predictions as to how the team's going to fare. So, Mike, I'll turn it over to you, and let's talk about this roster.
All right, so I'm glad to have you on, Alexander. Thanks for joining us. Some of the players in for Vancouver, we have Lucas Cavallini, the number 1 acquisition of this offseason. Transfer from Puebla down in Liga MX, the Canadian national team star, budding star. He joins the Caps in probably their biggest offseason signing in their history. We also have Ryan Raposo, came in through the Super Draft. Christian Gutierrez, Christian De Jong, transfer from Bogota, Leonard Owusu, a transfer from FC Ashdod, Patrick Metcalf, Gianfranco Faccineri, David Milinkovic, Brian Meredith, the goalkeeper, and Ranko Veslinovic, just the other day. So lots of movement in for the Caps. Some of the players out got goalkeeper Sean Melvin, defender Brendan McDonough, Scott Sutter, Brett Levis, not sure. Las Bangora, Joaquin Ardes, Daniel Henry, the former TFC man, Victor P.C. Giro, Zach McMath, Michael Chirinos, David Norman Jr., and John Arise. So plenty of movement this offseason from the Whitecaps, which I guess was fully to be expected since they had kind of a rough year last season, the first under their coach, Mark DeSantos. So I think a lot of good movement in. I want to get your take on it, Alexander, on what how you think this offseason is shaped up for the Whitecaps.
Well, I think if you ask most people, they've been pretty satisfied, especially after what went on last year, where they pretty much turned over a fresh slate, and they're pretty much an expansion side as Cincinnati was, at least personnel-wise. But I think off-season, they've done a great job bringing in a lot of bodies. Obviously, there's still holes, and there's big holes, and then so far the way it's trending, they're going to have to maybe start the season and try to mask some of those holes. But I think if you look year over year, the progression has been huge. There's a lot of solid young talent. A lot of U21 players have been brought in. A lot of good talent from maybe undervalued and underrated leagues have come in. So I think overall, the way it's shaped up, and especially what's most important, is that these guys have had a chance. Today is the 12th. They've already been in preseason for 3-4 weeks. Most of these big names have been working. Last year, it was basically at this time, we need 6 to 7 starters, and it kind of showed in their discombobulated start. So I think from those aspects, it's been a really positive offseason. It's kind of everyone's like, okay, let's see how this time and all this extra work ends up playing out on the pitch.
Yeah, good vibe can really help a team get off to a quick start, and being in the Western Conference there, Vancouver's got to get off to a quick start if they're going to compete for a playoff start, I would say. But it's looking at some of these names, I think Daniel Henry is the kind of the biggest name on the way out. Are there any other household names, players that the average listener or guys like Mike and I, kind of the average follower of the league, who are the household names? Who do we have to follow this upcoming season?
For the guys brought in, it's definitely Lucas Cavallini. He's going to be the guy who's going to get all the headlines. And when you splash out your club record fee rumored to be $6 million, that's normal, especially for a team that has a reputation for being quote unquote cheap. So I think Cavallini, he's a Canadian, so have had a chance to follow him. He's a player. You can score with both feet. He's big, but he's fast. He's he's very underrated defensively. Even people in Canada don't know what he can bring to the table defensively. So I think he's definitely going to be one as the season goes on. He's going to get out there. And then besides that, there's a couple of maybe project names or underrated names, like someone like Christian de Jome. I think he's someone that people will know by the end of the year. He played last year on loan at Independiente del Valle in Ecuador, which is a club that not many people know, but they actually won the South America's equivalent of the Europa League last year, which is a huge deal. And he was a big part. I think he scored 5 goals, had 4 assists, and I think he's someone on paper and the way he plays, and he fits Mark DeSantos' system. He's one to watch for. And then besides that, yeah, maybe Leonard Owusu. I've heard great things from him. Obviously, he's a bit of a mystery man coming from a lesser-known Israeli side, but he's got the skills. I'm lucky enough to know a couple of Ghanaian soccer experts, and they say passing-wise, he has the potential to be one of the best passing midfielders in MLS. Wow. So that's pretty exciting to hear. And then besides that, it's maybe Milinkovic might come back. He's had a history of good play, but he's also had off the field issues. And Ranko Veselinovic is, as a center back, he's going to be a great addition to the team, and he's one of the most exciting. But as a center back, they just tend to be undervalued and underappreciated. So you might not hear as much of him, but he may be just as important as a Cavallini or a de Jome.
Yeah, absolutely. The way the league's going, like everyone's focusing on young offensive-minded DPs. So to hear that Vancouver has paid attention to their center backs, I guess that's one other kind of tactical thing to look forward to and see if it works out for them, to see if they can maybe not give up as many goals and win those close games. Mike, you were going to jump in and say a little something else.
Yeah, I really like the Veslinovic signing. The fact that if it's kind of a loan with the option to buy, but the option kicks in if he plays 12 games, which I'm assuming if he's going to be the starting center back, he'll be in my projected 11, which we'll talk about later on in the show. Uh, the reason why I love it is this guy has played his whole career at that club, and this is his first move. So it looks like it looks like he has the talent that this could be the stepping stone. Come into a place like Vancouver, play extremely well, and that could be a stepping stone into Europe or something like that. So I really like that. I really like that signing, and as well, Lucas Cavallini, being a Canadian men's national team supporter as well as the USMNT. I love Cavallini and the game that he brings. So I'm excited for that signing for the Whitecaps as well.
Yeah, no, and I think Veselinovic, kind of to go on about him a little more, cause, as one of the newer signings, kind of fresher in memory. I think, honestly, it might, on paper, it gives Vancouver probably one of the deepest center back cores in MLS, which is crazy to think after 2 years ago where it felt like they're held together by paper. But yeah, with Derek Cornelius, who in my opinion is probably one of the most undervalued or underrated center backs. Maybe not in MLS, but he's definitely even in our own fan base. I think he's someone this year. He's going to be, the way he's been rising, especially with Canada, the performance he put in against the U.S. He's a player, and you got Eric Godoy, who's an excellent, calm defender. He can play right back, center back, and obviously the wild card, as we like to call him, Jesser Kamiri, who could probably be the best out of them all for all we know, but with his injury issues and rehab, he hasn't been fit until this offseason. So I think center back wise, they're set. And I think in the new MLS, it's going to be huge to have defenders, because even teams like LAFC or LA Galaxy or big clubs, they were prone to shipping a lot of goals. And I think Vancouver, if their center back units play to their potential, they could avoid doing that and be one of the best defensive teams in the league.
Right, and really quickly, a side note in LAFC, it was just announced yesterday, I think, that Walker Zimmerman got traded away over to Inter Miami for almost $1 million in allocation money. So, the defensive core in the Western Conference is going to be that much weaker without Zimmerman. So Vancouver could be the cream of the crop when it comes to the center backs there. I'm just looking at the roster.
Zimmerman will be in the Western Conference. He'll be with Nashville, not Miami.
Oh, Nashville. Sorry, wrong expansion side.
Wrong
Thanks,
expansion team.
There's so much going on. It's hard to keep track. But we didn't even mention Ali Adnan. I think we quickly talked about Christian Gutierrez. Like they've got a lot of guys who have a lot of experience, and just from an age perspective, all these guys are in their like early to mid 20s. Like these are players coming into their prime, like they're poised to have a breakout year. If you want to buy into all the hype, and I kind of do. I kind of want to see Vancouver rejuvenate a little bit and mix up the whole Cascadia rivalry a little bit, get in there and battle it out with Seattle and Portland, and contend with the California team. So I'm optimistic for Vancouver, and I'm excited to watch it as a fan.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I think defensively, yes, on paper, I guess. I don't know if we'll touch on it later. The midfield is a big question mark. But defensively, pound for pound, maybe bar another right back. But they do have a center back on trial, Amir Didic, if you haven't heard of him. He plays for FC Edmonton, and he's a Canadian national team starter. He's likely to sign, from what it seems like. He's played a lot of preseason, and Godoy can play right back. So if he does sign, I think defensively Vancouver with Max Crepeau in goal, sorted. Obviously, the midfield, we'll get into that after, but if they can sort that out, they'll be in good position.
Well, the one thing we do know about every team in MLS, if you're going to be in a good position, you've got to have your DPs playing their best soccer. As we say, your best players got to play their best games, play their best soccer. So the three DPs on the team as of right now, Lucas Cavallini, Hwang In-beom, and Ali Adnan. Mike, you noticed something on the Vancouver website when you were putting these notes together.
Yeah, so I was scrolling through the website and saw that Freddie Montero was listed as a designated player as well on the website. So they have four players labeled as DPs on whitecapsfc.com or whatever their website is. So I thought that was very interesting, and that's actually what had me last night. I was online doing a little bit of research trying to figure out who the three DPs are and who's the fourth one that got bought down by Tam. And I actually Googled it and found the article, and it was written by who other than Alexander. And that's why I'm like, wait a minute, this is the guy who follows us on Twitter. Let me send him a message and see if he could do this preview with us. From your article, it looks like the three are Cavallini, In-beom, and Adnan. Are we correct in that?
Yes, Freddie Montero is, in fact, he was a DP, but with the rules, I think when Cavallini was brought in, yes, when Cavallini was brought in, he was bought down. Well, he isn't officially bought down, but he's eligible to be bought down. There's still a chance he gets traded. There's still a chance he moves on. So I'm guessing, because obviously you don't have to be compatible until, what, a few days before the season, so they'll
Right.
probably announce it closer. But yes, Montero is under the threshold. Hwang and Bum is really close. We're not sure until we get the exact numbers, but he's like maybe $20,000 or $30,000 over, if not under. So maybe they'll have more room for another DP. But for now, the three real DPs are Adnan, Cavallini, and In-beom.
Let's talk a little more about Hwang and Bump because he seemed to really come in and have a solid start to last season and then maybe plateaued a little bit. What did you notice from him last year coming into the league, and what do you expect from him moving forward?
Well, I think probably he's probably the most important player if I'm the Whitecaps right now. Cavallini, obviously, you want him to score 15 to 20 goals, but I think even if he does that, if In-beom doesn't play up to his standard or play up to the level he knows he can play at, because he has the quality, and there's a reason. Actually, someone in the local media here, Manuel Vetti's vested in the. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's vested in the German media landscape as well, and he's got good sources. And he said Red Bull Leipzig was talking six million plus for him in the summer this window. So that would be crazy. So just they know the potential. I think he has the ability to play up. I think when he came in last year, he had some games you'd just watch In-beom on the field and you'd be like, wow, this guy can play. He's 2-footed. He might not be big, but he gets stuck into tackles. He can dribble. Probably one of the best dribblers on the team. He can play a 6. He can play an 8. He can play a 10. He's as versatile as they come. But I think what hampered him most last year, and it's nothing he can control, is that he didn't have an off season. So by the time he played, I think it was every game. He played every game. Some of them, like 3 of them as a sub, and he was playing for South Korea, going constantly back because they played a lot of friendlies in places like Azerbaijan and South Korea and China. You'd see these locations he was going to each international window, and he just burnt out. You could tell by the end of the year he was running on fumes. So this year he's had the 4 or 5 months off season. He has been playing in South Korea with the national team, so he's been fit. But if he can avoid that kind of fatigue, he's definitely got the tools to be a solid all-around midfielder and something that can help someone get more, say the team get more out of Cavallini, for example, or De Home on the wing and get more out of his teammates, because he's that kind of player. He's kind of the one where you can kind of see him helping elevate the players, but at the same time elevating himself.
It's cool to hear that there are other teams, either in the Bundesliga or elsewhere in Europe, that are interested in him. Because I feel like when he came into the league, that was the thought, right? Like, this is a great investment by Vancouver. They were able to swoop him up before anybody else could, give him 2 years, and then flip him for a big gain. It looks like that's happening. It's kind of crazy to think that it worked out almost perfectly for them. But you mentioned earlier that Vancouver kind of opened up the purse strings to get Cavallini a little bit, record signing. Is there any possibility? Maybe there's always a possibility, but do you think it's plausible to think that in a year's time or 2 years' time that they give In-beom a paycheck and keep him and Cavallini and another core of this team to really make a push?
Well, I think Cavallini, he's staying unless someone offers him the kind of money that you just can't say no. Because obviously, I don't think there's anyone in MLS even that doesn't have a price. Even Carlos Vela has a price, and he almost went to Barcelona. There's a reason for that, but I think In-beom, I'd have to maybe 0.5% chance. The money he's going to get is only going to go up. He's 23. He wants to play in Europe. He's even said in interviews, which has even irked some Whitecaps fans. I don't know why, because everyone knows he wants to play in Europe. He said in interviews, "I'm going to play in Europe." So I think even if you get $5 million, that's a great deal. Anything above that, you're clapping your hands. You made $3+ million profit. You could get another DP. And there's nothing wrong with it. The MLS has done, Garber said, is embracing a selling league mentality. So if Vancouver's going to be making lots of money, they can go invest in more quality players and just kind of, as it is the case in other leagues around the world where they have to deal with it, say like in South America where a lot of their players get sent to Europe and they have to deal with that cycle all the time.
Or a lot of their young players end up in the MLS now at Atlanta or
LAFC.
Exactly. Mike, you had put together some other notes on some of the DPs. Like when you're reviewing the roster, when you're reviewing these guys, what do you have to say about Adnan or what you're looking to see Cavallini do?
Yeah, I think Adnan really is a good piece in the back line. He's a good wing back type player. I was impressed with his play last season. I don't know a ton about him previously before he came to the Caps. I know that there was some talk as far as him coming in at the DP price tag. Was he worth it? I think he proved last year that he was. And going forward, I think it's a good fit along that back line. That's really strong. I'm just stoked about Cavallini, and I think that's the next section that I want to get to is most important player. In my opinion, Cavallini is that most important player. He is that one option up front, and I know that they do have other options behind him, but when you sign somebody for the record transfer fee for the club, you're not looking to play any depth. You're looking for that guy to shine. And if he comes in and scores 15 to 20 goals, that will lift the Whitecaps to the next level. If he does not, they will not make that next level, and they will be sitting at the outside of the playoffs looking in like they have in the past. So to me, that is that there has to be the most important player, as long as he does get service. Because if In-beom isn't giving him service and you're not getting any service from your midfield, then you're not going to get a lot of goals. But to me, I'm going with Lucas Cavallini as the most important player.
Now, Alexander, do you agree with that? Like, what's your take?
I think I maybe what I'd say is that Cavallini is the player that maybe has the most pressure, because when you sign a big money striker, that's just the way that the sport is. Are you going to score goals? And I think he's expecting that. He's taking that. But I think if you look, it's for me, my money. I already spoke of In-beom, but I'll speak of him again. It's definitely someone like him, because obviously I love to crunch the stats and numbers. I'm a numbers guy, and one thing that stuck out, even numbers or watching the game, is Vancouver last year, their midfield was basically a black hole. They'd get the ball out the back. They had excellent playing out the back ability. They'd fizz it around, and they'd get it to the midfield, and it gets stuck. So guys like Yordi Reyna up top, Freddie Montero, they'd actually outperform the chances they were expected to score. They'd score more than they were supposed to score, just based on how bad the service is. So I think Cavallini, he should score because he's a talented goal scorer. But if the service improves, then the numbers are going to go through the roof. And I think that's why we're seeing these changes that are brought in, these more wingers that can play kind of like as hybrid midfielders like Hwang and Milinkovic, and why we're going to see the Vancouver play with more aggressive fullbacks and aggressive center backs to kind of offset what the holes in their midfield, and why someone like Owusu's also very underrated in terms of his importance, because midfield-wise, that was their biggest need last year, and people are frustrated that they didn't add another piece. And the Whitecaps, I've been told they are working on another piece. Who knows if he'll come now or in the summer, but it's definitely the midfield. So for that, I'd say In-beom. Everyone is expecting him. They know as early as this summer he could be at Red Bull Leipzig, for an example, just to throw that name out there, other clubs. So he's going to have to perform. He's their most important player. Without him, who knows how the team's going to look. But I agree, Cavallini has the most pressure. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about the breakout youngsters. So one of the pieces we've been doing with every team preview is kind of picking 1, 2, maybe even 3 guys that we think will break out over this season. A couple of the guys that we have on this list, we got some good conversation, but getting a lot of information off of Reddit, trying to get some of the fans to give us an idea who some of these guys are. We're thinking Ryan Raposo, the super draft pick, Generation Adidas player, as well as Theo Bair. He kind of, some are saying he might have broken out last year, but he's, I don't know if I'd call it a breakout season. Last season, he scored that amazing goal against Portland, but other than that, I don't remember hearing too much about him. Raposo, usually Generation Adidas guys are, you're going to get kind of the first season is them kind of learning the league, and then the second year is when they break out. For some reason, I have a feeling about Raposo with some of the stuff as you were talking about the midfield not being crazy deep, that he might get some playing time. Young Canadian kid coming in and picking up some playing time. So those are kind of the two that I'm thinking. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think youth-wise, Vancouver is invested in youth, as we've seen, but homegrown-wise, yeah, it's definitely Raposo and Bear in terms of cracking the roster. They're definitely going to be in the day one roster the way things are trending. Well, Bear is 100% sure. Raposo, I'd say at the rate how he's played and how the signings have shaped out, 75% sure he is in the first day roster. So I think for Raposo, I think he's been a great draft pick. He's kind of even without playing a game, he's kind of the draft pick you want for, especially from a Whitecaps perspective. He's Canadian, he's cheap, he's only 20, so it's like almost like a homegrown signing. It's not those 23, 24-year-old college veterans you're kind of getting just to plug a hole in your lineup. He can be a player, and I think work rate wise, Mark DeSantos, everyone around the club's raving how he. Well, they're not going to rave too much. He's a young kid. They want to keep the expectations low, but you can tell they're impressed with how hard he works on and off the ball. How he likes to play high intensity, and even though he's a rookie, he doesn't look out of place in that regard. Obviously, his technical skills and all that are growing, but he's got his head screwed on right, and people appreciate that. And then Bear, he's another story because he's just a special player. How often do you see someone who's 6'5" and he can play on the wing, he can play as a striker, he can play as a second striker? And last year he, on a bad Whitecaps team, especially in the summer, he kind of shone and rose in those minutes, and he's starting to put his way into national team conversation, and he's definitely the kind of player you're gonna watch out for him next year. Obviously, minutes are a question, but the Whitecaps are gonna have to go rotation heavy. They're playing in the Canadian Championship. It's not gonna be easy this year with more teams, more games. So he's definitely gonna get his share. And I think, based on what he's seen, he's kind of someone that he grows into the roles he's played in. He grew into his role at the Whitecaps. Even say with Canada, he played in their January camp, scored his first goal. He kind of grows into his roles he's given, and I think this year he's going to take an extra step and grow into the kind of player he can be. And I think with him, in 4 years, if he's not in Europe, we'll be like, either hopefully he's dominating the MLS level and he just likes it here, or it's just something went wrong, because I think he's trending that way, the way he's kind of burst onto the scene.
All right. I had a little chuckle because one of the things you're talking about him is like, well, he's Canadian and he's cheap. And like, well, as long as he's not cheap because he's Canadian.
Well, yeah. No. Yeah, I guess that's good because he's a youngster, right? You're not paying, $300K for a draft pick, which is always
Exactly. So we really got into some good detail on the roster here. Mike, you put together a projected starting 11. You went with a 4-1-4-1. Is this something that Vancouver usually plays? I know, Mike, you were looking at some of the formations from last season, and then let us know what they are.
Yeah, so I went through in three different games. 3 of the last games were in different formations. So I just stayed with the, keeping it consistent with how we've been doing it for all the clubs we've been previewing, is just using the formation for the last game that was played in the end of last season. So that was a 4-1-4-1. Kripo in goal, there's no question there. Adnan on the left, Cornelius, Veselinovic, and Nerwinski along the back. Rose as the kind of that defensive midfield. Reyna, Owusu, In-beom, and Milinkovic in the four midfield there, as well as Cavallini up top. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. But again, as far as the formations go, it looks like DeSantos was flirting with different formations at the end of the year. What that was about, I'm not sure. But what formation would you say that it kind of most fits DeSantos and the roster that he has, Alex?
Well, I think his ideal formation, and he's not quite there yet, is the 4-3-3. He tried it last year. It didn't work out. He tried a 4-3-2-1, but with Dos Santos, he's wingers. He loves them to tuck in and play lower. He loves them to help the midfield. So what's interesting is so far this preseason, he's flirting with the 4-2-3-1, which I think for their roster right now is the perfect fit, because with their lack of midfielders, it's probably going to be a pivot of In-beom and Owusu, and until Owusu's ready, because he hasn't yet arrived with the visa issues, it would be Tybert or Andy Rose, any of those two. And because with the 4-3-2-1, it allows him to put Cavallini up top. It allows him to put one of Jordi Reyna and Freddie Montero in the hole underneath, whichever one. And on the wings, it's Milinkovic, and if not, Reyna can play the left wing, and it's De Jong looks to be the locked-in starter. So I think offensively they got a lot of weapons in a 4-2-3-1. They got most of their attackers. I think a front four of Cavallini, say Reyna, Milinkovic, and De Jong is a strong front four. The midfield is a bit lacking, but with the way the wingers play, it's meant to offset that. And then backline-wise, it'd be Max Crepeau, Ali Adnan, and Derek Cornelius, and then likely based on when Veselinovic is ready, it'd be Godoy and Cornelius. With Nerwinski at right back, but when Veselinovic is ready, it's easy to see Godoy at right back, because that looks like what DeSantos would go with. And then obviously Kamiri, as long as he's fit, he'd be in that mix too. So I think, a 4-1-4-1, they don't quite have the defensive midfielder DeSantos wants, because he wants someone that can play on the ball, and they're looking for those kind of players, and those, obviously they don't come cheap. They might be a DP, which is why it might wait till the summer if someone's sold. So for now, the 4-2-3-1 definitely seems the way to go.
So if they get their starting lineup, if everything goes well for the team, if the DPs are clicking, if they're healthy, everything goes right, we're looking at Vancouver to make the playoffs, probably anywhere between the 4 and 5 seed. If everything goes well, they hit their ceiling. I don't know if they're at the level of an LAFC or a Seattle at this point, but if it just all falls apart, if guys get hurt, if they sell off some of their top players, if nothing goes right, if the Dos Santos magic has already worn off, they're bottom of the Western Conference. That's kind of where we see the ceiling and the floor for Vancouver. What do you think would be a successful season, and what would you consider a failure for the Whitecaps?
Well, I think the way things are, Dos Santos has gotten his chance to mold the roster, and when you kind of get that chance to do it, because it's not often you get a coach like Dos Santos, pretty much already like 90% of these players, he brought them in. How many coaches in MLS can say that after their first year? That's usually you have to inherit a bunch of guys, and they basically cleaned out the roster. So for him, it's improvement. It's improvement. Obviously, going from 13th, I guess now with the new expansion side to 12th or 11th wouldn't be too great of an improvement. But as long as people want them to play nicer soccer, they want them to start showing more offensive cohesiveness, show a good improvement on the field. And then I think standings wise, I think just as long as they're flirting with the playoff spot, I think that would be a good season. Obviously the Canadian Championship, I think if they don't make the final this year, or at least, make a good run in that and avoid any cavalry disasters like last year, that would be successful. So I think what's unique about this team is the ceiling. I look at the ceiling, and it's a very flexible ceiling, because I think they're going to improve. They're going to play a lot nicer. Dos Santos has already had a lot of time to work with this team on how he wants to play, and they're going to look a lot more energetic. When a buzzword around the team is pressing, I think every interview, every day I hear press, and they're going to Cavallini, De Jong, all these guys, they can press it. They're going to press other teams right off the field. They're going to try to. So I think there's going to be improvements in that way. And I think with the ceiling, they have such a young team. And I think when you have a young team with all these question marks, it makes the ceiling flexible. If guys like Owusu can play to the level he can, In-beom, Cavallini, even he's not old, he's not young either. He's still got maybe room to go. Dahome, etc. All these younger guys, if they can play to the ceilings that they can, fourth, third, even flirting with second is possible. But I think to be realistic, this does look like a team that can flirt with the playoffs, and I think sixth, fifth, as you said, is definitely something they can fight for, especially since typically in MLS we see the top 2 or 3 teams in the conference kind of running away, and then that rest is kind of that gray zone. They can definitely be in that gray zone for sure.
Well, we'll get to see how the new Vancouver Whitecaps look February 29th as they host Sporting Kansas City. Mike, as a TFC fan, are you worried about the rise of Vancouver here? I'll let you have the last word before we wrap things up here.
Well, luckily for from a TFC perspective, Vancouver being on the West Coast and in the Western Conference, there's not as much hatred as there is with Montreal. So and for me personally, I have a lot of family out in Vancouver, and I went to a few Vancouver games at Swangard Stadium out there, when they were USL side. So I definitely, I have a little bit of a soft spot for the Whitecaps. I'm not too worried about them taking the Canadian Championship this year, but they are definitely improving. I don't see them losing to Cavalry and even maybe Mark Dos Santos's former club, but not really, because now it'd be its expansion team through CPL, but Atletico Ottawa that just got announced with former TFC DP Mista as the head coach. That's a very interesting thing. I'm sure we could talk for a while about. But yeah, overall Vancouver, I'm expected to see. I expect to see them definitely improve, and they're on the right track. And hopefully, management will stick with Dos Santos, even if things aren't going great through the first half of the season. Stick with them. They've got that roster in place that he has built. Give him time to work with it and that stability. Other than that, I want to thank Alexander for coming on. And, you can find Alexander. So listeners, followers, subscribers to our YouTube page, please find Alexander at Alex Gangue Ruzic, GangueRuzic on Twitter, and check out the blog at BTS Van City on Twitter, and check out his work there for everything Vancouver, CPL, and Canadian soccer. So thanks for your time, everybody, and we will catch you all later.
Thank you very much.